Welcome to Politicking. I'm Larry King. Earlier this month, the United States Interior Department announced a new 5-year offshore and gas drilling plan. Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke says the plan would open 90% of the nation's offshore reserves to development by private companies. Critics immediately blasted the plan as unnecessary and dangerous for the environment. Let's talk about that with someone who spent many years in the trenches of environmental activism, Robert Kennedy Jr. He's also an environmental attorney, author, radio talk show host, and co-founder and president of the Waterkeeper Alliance. He's the son of the late United States Senator and U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Okay, I guess I know how you feel about the new plan. How strongly what's going to happen with it, do you think?
I don't know. None of the states wants to do it. And it's kind of, there's a bunch of things happening. One is that the FEMA just announced that we spent $305 billion this year just within the continental United States on injuries from climate change, the droughts, the fires, the floods, the hurricanes, the storms, et cetera. So, we probably, as a nation, should be thinking about other ways to go than continuing the addiction to carbon. The investment that we would make in transitioning to new forms of energy would benefit all Americans. This plan, if it actually went through, we won't start drilling for 10 years. Those oil wells will then be active for 30 to 50 years after that. And, at that time, oil's becoming irrelevant. That China is going to ban internal combustion engines. General Motors has announced that it is going to transition completely off of internal combustion engines. Norway, England, Scotland, the Netherlands are all about to ban internal combustion engines. Carbon is really at the end of it's at the fin of the cycle. We're seeing that in coal too. The top 50 coal companies are now either in bankruptcy or, close to it. The top 3 companies, Consol, Peabody, and Arch Coal, have lost 80% of their value in the last 2 years.
Why are these people then still living in yesterday?
Because of the funding that they're able to give to our political candidates. The weird thing.
It's all political.
It's money in politics.
And then they announced that there'll be no drilling off Florida's coast because the Republican governor complained about it.
But the Republican governor in Massachusetts and South Carolina and North Carolina have all complained as well. But Rick Scott was a strong supporter of President Trump, and he's running for Senate this year. And I think it may also be that, President Trump does own real estate on the Florida coast in a very, very vulnerable place. And he may personally understand how it's going to affect Florida and believe that somehow Florida is unique, and it's not.
The East Coast could be flooded. Could be, some people think, gone.
It's already getting flooded. And the administration's response to that has been to get rid of the coastal flooding regulations so that we're not going to know how much flooding is taking place, and to stop federal agencies from talking about climate change.
You recently posted on Facebook that clean water should transcend politics. You also said we're at an inflection point in terms of this issue. What do you mean?
The inflection point is that it's now cheaper to produce non-carbon fuel energy than it is to produce carbon energy. For example, to build a solar plant today, a utility-scale solar plant, costs about $1 billion a gigawatt. To build a coal plant costs $3 to $5 billion a gigawatt. To build a nuke plant costs $9 billion a gigawatt. So you're not going to see any utility that has to pay their own expenses will never build a coal plant again. People, the industry already knows this, and that's why you're seeing this dramatic loss in value of coal stocks and other carbon stocks, because the industry recognizes that, nobody's going to ever build a coal plant again. We're past the inflection point. And the industry strategy is, since they cannot beat us, wind and solar in the marketplace, Their strategy is to capture the political system and get for themselves huge subsidies that are not available to wind and solar. We give close to $1 trillion in subsidies annually to the carbon industry. And also to make it very easy to build a pipeline in this country, to build the infrastructure, but to build coal terminals, LNG facilities. The industry is putting lots and lots of money into those facilities in order to anchor our economy in an antiquated fuel source at a time when it's archaic and it no longer makes any economic sense.
Robert Kennedy Jr. is our guest. We'll have more right after this. Robert, what do you think your late father and late uncle would have thought of Donald Trump?
You know, I think that I don't want to speak for my uncle or my father. And when, Trump came into office, when he was taking his inaugural, somebody asked me on CNN, what do you think about Trump? And I said, he can be anybody he wants to be. He came into office less burdened by ideology or obligations, financial obligations, than probably any president in the century. He really had an opportunity to be, to do something for this country and for the world and to make America live up to her ideals. And I think instead, he's not only brought disrepute upon our country, but he's brought disrepute upon the whole notion of democracy. Our nation was the model democracy. We created it in 1776. We were the only democracy in the world at that point. There were 6 in 1865. Today there's 180. And they're all modeled on what we did in this country. We were the exemplary nation, which means being an example to the rest of the world. And I think anybody who looks at us and says, is going to say now that if democracy can produce that kind of leadership, why would we want it? And, I think that's very dismaying for people who love this country and believe that we are an exemplary nation.
What do you make of all this questioning about his mental fitness?
I don't know. I know what anybody knows, which is reading the tweets and reading the stuff that you see in the newspaper. The foreign policy makes no sense to me. The domestic policy makes no sense. I think sometimes it's frightening.
Okay, your family was brought into the Trump administration in this way. The New York Times reported that Donald Trump expected his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, to safeguard him the same way your father protected his brother, that the Attorney General should protect the President. And he mentioned that, the President, Trump did.
And I think that is a fundamental misinterpretation of the relationship between my father and my uncle, and also the function of the Attorney General's position in government, constitutional posture. The Attorney General is not the private attorney of the President of the United States. My father was a trusted advisor to my uncle. They shared the same vision for this country, and they worked together on that. But my father's first day in office, he came in and said, we are not going to have any politics in this department. This department is going to be about enforcing the law and civil rights. It meant going after the mob and all of the, helping, being on the side of the poor. It didn't mean deploying your department and its energies to do political work for the President of the United States. And in fact, he ended up prosecuting his own brother-in-law, my mother's brother, and he lost the case. He ended up prosecuting, some of their.
He went farther left than your uncle did. He moved faster on civil rights than your uncle did.
I think he was more
activist.
He was more governed by his passions. My uncle was a little bit more dispassionate, but.
Where do you think the Mueller's thing is going to go?
I don't know.
You don't think the president would remove him, do you?
I don't know. Who knows?
A year ago, during the transition, I didn't know this, you met with Donald Trump to discuss a vaccine safety commission. What happened with that?
Nothing's happened so far. And the president has appointed a number of people to high-level positions at CDC and at NIH who are pharmaceutical industry insiders. So I don't think that we are going to see a major reform of vaccine policy. You know, we saw, when I was a kid, when you were a kid, we got 3 vaccines. My children got 69 vaccines. Why is that? Because suddenly the industry said, okay, now we have a product that the federal government is going to order 200 million people to buy. There's huge margins on vaccines. Some of these vaccines cost $450 a shot. The companies are making billions, $50 billion a year on these.
What did Trump say?
And what happened was in '89, that generation in '89, when the vaccine policy suddenly changed, is the sickest generation in history. So all these diseases that you and I never knew about, like food allergies, ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, juvenile diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and autism, all began in that generation that was born in 1989 or afterwards. And what we've said is there's really strong evidence, scientific evidence, peer-reviewed science, that indicates that it is certain of these vaccines and certain vaccine ingredients that are causing these problems. We ought to do the science and look at them, and that's never been done. And I asked President Trump to do it.
We're running out of time. What did he say?
And he said he would do it, but we've never heard from him again.
Always great seeing you, Robert.
Good to see you, Larry.